Good morning. It is time for another episode of Game Relics. I know what you're thinking. This looks an awful lot like slipcasting and not Fireball Island. And that is because every morning I have to pour slip and then let it dwell for 55 minutes, which gives us plenty of time to return to Fireball Island. So it's true, I have not been working on the game as much as I would have liked, but I did get a little bit of time in on the island. I guess it was maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Let's just cut to the footage. So a few weeks ago, as I said, I was able to spend some time on Fireball Island, and I really just focused on the crater. I wanted to make this little pathway from Cave 4 into a true, treacherous bridge of Khazad-dûm a la Lord of the Rings adventurous pathway instead of the just standard mountain trail that it was. So that involved expanding the crater. I made the crater wider, as you can see. I did a lot of grinding, and I made it into an actual bridge, a bridge across what will eventually be a crater filled with lava. At least that's the plan. Okay, so there was that. And I have been shopping. Thanks to eBay, we now have a full complement of explorers, including backups like this sad guy without an arm. So we're ready for action there. And we've got a jewel. And not just one jewel, we've got 3 jewels. You only need one to play, but we've got backups. Speaking of backups, I've got 2 of each type of bridge now, just in case I break or lose one of them. Speaking of losing things, how about these marbles? Haha, I've got some official Fireball Island marbles now, so we are ready to attack explorers with them. Speaking of attack, there's a backup Vulcar and official game dice. Now, I have been going bananas trying to build a complete deck of Fireball Island game cards, and it's not easy. So we're painfully close on the cards, but we're short on just a couple of them. Now, I don't know. I have to decide, do I want to continue to haunt the treacherous shores of eBay for additional cards, or do I just want to print my own deck? Printing my own deck would cost me about $50. I mean, not including the time it would take to make the cards, to design the cards. But I would have them, and I could reprint them whenever I wanted, and I wouldn't worry about ruining vintage cards. But there's the magic of the vintage cards. I don't know. It's a big decision, one that I'm not going to make right now because we still have a lot to do on the game itself. Doesn't fit. So here's where we stand right now on Fireball Island. Still so much to do. So much, in fact, it's almost overwhelming. So we're not going to think about it. We're not going to worry about painting it right now. We're going to worry about 2 things this episode. One, I want to just fill in all the little fiddly unfinished areas, things that I've grinded away. Maybe there wasn't enough epoxy there. I just want to patch that up. To that end, I have purchased a little bit of this. It is the Freeform Air, the same stuff that I sculpted the majority of the board out of, but it's Freeform Air fast, which means when you mix it, it sets in about 5 minutes instead of taking overnight. So this will go a lot faster. So that is step 1. Step 2 that I want to do with this episode is I want to, instead of having all these little stepping stones drawn on here with a Sharpie, I'd like to go in and actually carve them in using the rotary tool. Ambitious? Yes. Will it affect the gameplay? I don't think so. I think the marble should roll over these things just fine, especially since I increased the angle of a lot of these paths. The marbles go pretty fast. And last but not least is this crater. I want to finish this crater and get it ready for some cool interactive lighting effects. Fancy! That's the plan, at least. Hopefully we'll get there by the end of this episode. Unfortunately, that's all the time I've got this morning, so I will catch up with this project tomorrow. All right, it is day 2, and before I start mixing up some epoxy, I want to figure out the interior walls of the crater. I'm going to need to build it up with some foam core before I add any more epoxy. And I've got to maybe stuff a little bit of foam core in a couple of other areas where I've broken through the epoxy that's there, so I can add just, I guess it's like a foam core armature to support the additional epoxy. I know, I said foam core and I'm using cardboard. My apologies. We are actually going to be using this stiff poster board / cardboard stuff to build up the interior armature to hold these epoxy walls once I start throwing that epoxy clay around. At least that's our plan. I'm also going through and adding a little bit of a backer to areas that I've broken through the board while sculpting it. Alrighty, we're gonna go for it. So I am going to be using the Freeform Air fast for the first time. I read the literature like a good artist, and it looks like I'm gonna have about 6 minutes of working time per batch. And they also, I guess, as I said before when I was using the Freeform Air, it's exothermic, meaning it gets hot as it cures. And I guess that this is super exothermic, and they recommend never mixing more than a ping pong ball sized batch because it gets so hot. So we'll be doing that. I'm going to be mixing up a lot of small batches. I'm going to work on patching up all the little holes around here, and then once that's all done and I get the feel for the material, we're going to do the inner crater. I've got gloves to protect my hands. I'm going to be using water to smooth it out. Some folks have said that water works better than alcohol. Let's find out. And I've got some tongue depressors to use as tools, and some Holly Paley swizzle sticks, which I thought would be handy. We'll see. Here we go. So right off the bat, after mixing up my first little ping pong sized ball of epoxy, I decided that the water just didn't work. I know it works for lots of people that have given me comments online. I'm glad it works for you. I just find the alcohol is just so much better. I spray a little bit onto my fingers and it keeps this extra sticky stuff from sticking to me, and it keeps it sticking onto, Fireball Island. Okay, so that does it for the small stuff on the outside. Well, most of the small stuff. Now, this stuff sets really fast. They're not kidding. So here's a little bit that I mixed up. I didn't even have time to use it. It set so quickly. So they're not kidding about making ping pong ball sized mixes. And when they say ping pong ball, they don't mean a ping pong of A and B. They just mean your end result is a ping pong ball. Anyway, we're going to try doing the crater now. Before building up the crater walls, I wanted to just refine the bottom areas of this pathway. Remember, we're going for a terrifying, handrail-free Mines of Moria type of passway over a boiling pit of lava. Okay, so we're going to do the crater floor, and this little piece of wood with the saran wrap over it is going to act as the crater floor for right now. Now, I want to replace this later with some plexiglass that has a cool color in it, maybe some blinking lights. But initially, I just need a form to act as kind of a guide for when I mash in the epoxy clay. So hopefully this works. Okay, this is where the cardboard armature does its job, and it keeps the epoxy clay from just mashing all the way back into the hollow space underneath the board. It's looking like a volcanic crater, folks. Okay, it seems mostly dry. We've given it 15-ish minutes. Let's see if this worked. Well, it didn't stick. The saran wrap did its job. Super nice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to add a little bit more epoxy underneath the bridge to get a proper full-on, Khazad-dûm Gandalf crossing type of bridge. And then we're going to switch to the rotary tool and start grinding detail into all of these bits and bobs. Now, the deal with the grinding, though, is remember that stand that I made on episode 2, I think it was, when I was out in the sun and it was beautiful and I was grinding away on this thing? Well, it's not so sunny anymore, so we're going to have to rethink the way that we're doing the Foredom tool. If you recall, in an earlier episode of Tiki Technical Tuesday, when we got the new laser cutter, we did a lot of work on this formerly garage half of the studio to make it into, I guess what we're kind of calling the Fab Lab. I don't know. It's a place for the laser cutter to live, and I also put in this big French cleat wall and a new workbench. It's a folding workbench. I love it. So these French cleats are where I want the Foredom handpiece to live. So a French cleat is this really neat strip of wood that has a 45-degree angle cut in it that lets you hang tools with a matching 45-degree hanger. It's very strong and very stable and easy. To make the new French cleat hanger for the Foredom, I'm using this. It's a new studio tool. I've wanted it for years, and I am so excited about what we can make with it. This is the Shaper Origin. It is a handheld CNC router, and it can do a lot. It can do, in fact, so much that I'm going to do a whole Tiki Technical Tuesday just on this tool in a few episodes from now. For this episode, we're just going to quickly make the new hanger for the wall so we can get back to the star of the show, which is, of course, Fireball Island. So the Shaper Origin is literally a tool from the future. It takes a design, in this case a design that I did back in the house on my computer, and it has an electronic eye. It looks at these little domino stickers that I'm putting on the board, and it can track its position on the board and cut your part. It's unbelievable. Here you can see the design that I did earlier, and it has placed it on the board, and it's like a video game. I now just have to follow the plotted lines, and the cutter will take my lumpy, bumpy handheld action and completely smooth it out and correct it and make these perfect parts. Just like the laser cutter, this tool uses vector files, which makes all those years and years of using Adobe Illustrator pay off in a big way for me. I cannot wait to dive deep into this tool, but it's a complicated tool, so I'm going to practice with it a bit more before we do a Tiki Technical Tuesday featuring the Shaper in its entirety. I based this rotary tool hanger design on the incredible camera rig done by Woby Designs that I built a couple weeks ago. You may have seen it on my Instagram feed. It is brilliant, and I thought it would make a great swing arm to get the rotary tool out of the way when I'm not using it on the French cleat wall. Got the parts cut. I have been dying to put this thing together. I had to sculpt. I wanted to finish the Dead Bastard sculpture yesterday. So I just was sitting, this was sitting on the workbench. I wanted to dive into it, but I couldn't anyway. End of the day, I finally got into work on it, and this beautiful piece is the wrong size. This is a perfect example of why I am practicing by just making, things for the tool wall instead of using some fancy woods to make some elaborate artwork, because I'm still learning. And also, this is a good example of why I should be building these things with 3D software instead of 2D software and kind of putting it together in my head, because I make mistakes. There are 4 of these things for the arm, so I assumed that it would have to be 4 pieces wide, but it's actually like this on the part, so it only needs to be 2 pieces wide, so this thing is too wide, so I've got to cut another one. But that's no biggie because I've got plenty of wood. So I dashed back into the house, revised my file, sent it back to the Shaper, and got a fresh piece of wood with some new domino stickers on it, and cut the properly sized part. At least I hope it's the proper size. So I'll cross our fingers. It's perfect. Perfect. But that's my alarm. The slip is ready to drain. So I sadly can't build this until this afternoon. Torture! Okay, it is go time, and we are putting it together. Just like when we cut things with the laser cutter, it is always so incredible to see a design leap off of your computer into the real physical world. It's like making your own toys. I cannot put into words how magic it is. The whole process, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I also want to give a second shout out to Woby Designs on Instagram for the inspiration for this project. His Woby jig, his camera jig is incredible, and we are using it to shoot all of this footage.
The Foredom is super heavy, so I'm using 2 cleats to hold it up, plus these dowels to keep this thing locked in place. This pin holds the arm up when I'm not using the Foredom, and the handpiece rests in this handy little cradle. Boop. When I want to use it, I pull the pin like a grenade, and we are ready for action.
So first and foremost, I think I want to add an extra little view into the caldera's interior by drilling a hole right here. So we've got, the pathway, you've got your players walking along here, right? I've got a little window right here into the caldera, but I think it would be cool to put another hole right here, and that hole would actually lead into like almost the base of the caldera, if you will. Man, it's hard to film this thing because it's so tiny, but I think it would be cool. So that's what I'm going to start. I'm going to start drilling a little hole in there. Then I'm going to get out the file. We're going to go crazy with the file for a while, and then it's just Foredom hand tool mania.
The Freeform Air, it's like balsa wood with absolutely 0 grain, so it is really easy to carve, drill, sand. Anything that you could do to balsa wood, you can do to the Freeform Air. It's Foredom time, and the new hanger is working great. The only quibble I've got is I need to make a second handpiece holder, that little cradle thing. I need a second one close to where I'm working because it's just too hard to reach all the way up to the tool to hang it when I'm not using the handpiece.
Okay, I have picked the tiniest, tiny little pointy bit, and I'm going to start carving in all the little footpath stones. I've been putting this off. I'm a little freaked out about it, but it's something I've just got to do, and I think it'll look great when it's done. I did a couple practice cuts on the bottom just to make sure it'll look okay. It's going to be great.
So along with painting the board, cutting out all these little game places has been giving me some serious anxiety. It's something that I just was really worried about screwing up. In the end, it wasn't a big deal. It was pretty easy to do. And I've always got to remind myself, if I mess it up, I can just fix it. I just put a little more epoxy putty in there and let it cure, and then I can swap it out. I eventually stood the board up because it just was a way easier to work on it, looking at it this way than it was looking straight down on it. And I eventually got through almost all of them. A few of these things were really, really difficult to reach with the tool. For the hard-to-reach spots, I had to use a hand tool. I used this little dental carving tool. It's a wax carving tool, and it worked great. As you can see, the Freeform Air is soft like balsa wood, so it carves very nicely. After I was done with the rotary tool and the hand tool, I went to sanding. I sanded down the entire board with some sanding blocks just to remove tool marks, to get, just any rough patches down nice and smooth. I'm basically just trying to get this board as good as it can look before our next major step.
All right. I think we are ready for the magical moment of primer. I'm going to take this outside and I'm going to put a nice layer of gray primer on it, and that'll tie everything together. Like right now, I've still got all these pen marks on here. You can see like different colors, like where I had primer on it before, and then you've got the lighter spots that I've added more epoxy putty. So the primer, getting a nice even coat of primer on here will really tie the surface together, and it'll really make any imperfections or areas that I need to work on pop, and then I can go back and touch those up. But yeah, I have painstakingly got every single one of these little footsteps in, and I keep catching ones that I missed, and I go back and I add them in. But yeah, can't wait to get some primer on this thing. So there you have it, primed and ready for paint, ready for some lights. Of course, it's also ready for some touches up. I see a lot of areas that I gotta go back and fix, but I could not be happier. It's really exciting to see this pathway on there. It looks super cool. The paint is still drying, so I can't test a marble just yet, but Wait a minute. Did I just say that we're not going to roll a marble along and take out a bunch of explorers? Yeah, that's not going to happen. Guess what? The paint is dry right now, and we're going to go back into the studio, and we're going to launch some marbles. All right. I got the slow motion camera ready. Vulcar seems rather angry. Let's start climbing the mountain. So there you have it. Fireball Island as it stands right now. The next step is probably going to be paint. And I'm going to be honest, I have a ton of anxiety about that. I'm just not that knowledgeable in the world of paint. So anyone who's got any hints, advice, tips, feel free to send them my way. Because yeah, I need all the help I can get when it comes to getting some color onto this island. So hopefully next episode, paint and then also electronics. I want to get this thing lit up and I want to start playing it. I cannot wait. Thanks for tagging along on episode 4 of Game Relics, and I will see you next episode.